The first light of dawn spilled through the old wooden shutters, painting long stripes of gold across the floorboards. The house was quiet except for the faint ticking of the wall clock and the rhythmic breathing of someone still lost in dreams. Elias sat alone by the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a cup of black coffee that had long since gone cold. Outside, the birds were beginning to sing, their voices weaving through the mist that lingered over the garden. He used to love mornings like this, when the world was still simple, when faith was easy, and obedience felt natural. But those days felt far away now, almost like someone else's story. He had come back to his childhood home 3 weeks ago, after years of living in the city, chasing deadlines, promotions, and a name that could outlast his exhaustion. His mother had passed 2 winters ago, and his father now lived quietly in a care home across the river. The house felt emptier than he remembered, though he could still sense her presence. The faint smell of lavender oil, the small crucifix she kept by the door, the soft echo of her prayers that once filled the halls. "Do God's will, my son," she used to say, "even when it costs you something." He had nodded back then, but never really understood. That morning, the gospel reading from his missal lay open beside the untouched toast. "Whoever does the will of God is my brother and sister and mother." Elias read the line twice, tracing the words with his finger. Jesus had looked around the crowded room and called the obedient his family. It struck him like a quiet thunder, not a rebuke, but a revelation. He realized that all his life, he had been chasing belonging in places that demanded his performance, not his surrender. Outside, the church bell tolled 7 times, a sound both familiar and foreign. It pulled at something deep within him. He hadn't stepped inside that church since his mother's funeral. He told himself he was too busy, too far gone, too unworthy. But the truth was simpler. He had been afraid to hear again the call that once shaped his boyhood dreams, afraid to face the silence that would ask him to change. After finishing his coffee, he walked toward the church. The path was lined with fallen leaves, their brittle edges crunching beneath his shoes. Every step felt like a memory returning. His mother kneeling at the altar, the laughter of the parish children, the priest's voice echoing through the wooden rafters. When he entered, the scent of wax and incense enveloped him like a memory of heaven. The chapel was nearly empty. A few elderly women murmured the rosary softly in a corner. The flicker of votive candles threw trembling shadows on the stone walls. Elias sat in the back pew and closed his eyes. He didn't know what to say, so he said nothing. Only the silence spoke. After some time, he noticed an older priest walking slowly down the aisle, checking the candles. It was Father Damien, who had been the parish priest since Elias was a boy. His hair was silver now, his steps careful but steady. When their eyes met, the old man smiled. "It's been a while," Father Damien said gently. "Your mother would be glad to see you here." Elias managed a faint smile. "Maybe she's the one who called me back." The priest nodded. "Mothers have a way of doing that." He sat beside him in the pew, both of them facing the crucifix at the front. "You look like a man with questions." Elias hesitated. "I suppose I am. I've been reading about obedience, about doing God's will, but I don't even know where to begin anymore. I feel like I've been running my whole life, and now I've stopped, but I can't hear what he wants." Father Damien folded his hands. "Obedience isn't always about hearing clearly," he said. "Sometimes it's about being quiet long enough to recognize which voice isn't yours. God's will isn't hidden. It's usually the next loving thing you can do." Elias looked up at the crucifix. The figure of Christ hung there, serene, surrendered, utterly still. He wondered how obedience could lead to that kind of peace. That afternoon, he walked through the small town, letting the rhythm of life surround him. Children ran past with school bags. Shopkeepers arranged flowers in the windows. Near the church, he saw an elderly woman struggling to carry her groceries up the steps. Without thinking, he rushed forward to help her. "Thank you, young man," she said, smiling. "I live just up the hill. These old bones don't keep up like they used to." He carried the bags for her, listening as she talked about her garden, her late husband, and her gratitude for every sunrise. Her house was small but warm, filled with the scent of fresh bread. Before he left, she pressed a small loaf into his hands. "Take this," she said, "a gift for your kindness." As Elias walked home, he felt something shift in him, something simple, like a window opening after years of dust. He remembered Father Damien's words, the next loving thing. Maybe obedience wasn't about grand gestures or divine revelations. Maybe it began right here, in these quiet, uncelebrated acts of mercy. That evening, he lit a candle by his mother's crucifix and prayed for the first time in months. His words were halting, clumsy, but real. "Lord," he whispered, "if doing your will means loving what's in front of me, then help me do that. Help me start small." The next morning, he woke before dawn again. The mist was thicker this time, and the air smelled of rain. He walked back to the church and found Father Damien kneeling by the altar, his lips moving silently in prayer. Elias knelt beside him. For a long time, neither spoke. Then the priest placed a hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to have it all figured out," he said softly. "You just have to be willing." Elias nodded. Something deep in his heart, something that had been asleep for years, began to stir. For the first time, he felt like a son again, not of blood or duty, but of faith. That morning, as the sun broke through the stained glass, filling the sanctuary with colors of crimson and gold, Elias finally understood what Jesus meant. Family was not bound by flesh, but by surrender. The ones who do the Father's will are bound together in a love deeper than ancestry, a communion woven through obedience, forgiveness, and mercy. He stood there, watching the light spill across the altar, and whispered to himself, "I want to belong to that family." Outside, the bell rang once more. Not as a summons this time, but as a welcome home. He smiled through the quiet tears that came unbidden, the kind that washed the soul clean. In that sacred morning light, Elias took his first step toward the life God had been calling him to all along. Not a life of striving, but of surrender. And somewhere beyond the veil of time, he felt his mother smile. The next few days passed like soft echoes of grace. Elias began rising early, walking to the small parish each morning before the day's noise could steal the silence. Sometimes he prayed with words, sometimes he simply sat before the crucifix and let his heart rest. The rhythm of it steadied him. The slow lighting of candles, the creak of wooden pews, the steady pulse of quiet devotion. He began to see that obedience wasn't a single act, but a way of living, a willingness to keep showing up even when you don't yet see why. Father Damien often found him there and would share a few quiet thoughts before Mass. "The heart learns obedience," he said one morning. "In the same way the earth learns to bloom, by surrendering to the seasons." Elias had never thought of faith that way before, but now it began to make sense. His heart had been a winter field for too long. It was time for something new to grow. That afternoon, Elias went to visit his father at the care home across the river. The place was modest but peaceful, surrounded by fields of wildflowers that danced in the autumn wind. His father sat by the window watching the light shift across the hills. When Elias entered, the old man looked up with surprise, then smiled faintly. "You've been gone a while," he said, his voice rough from years of disuse. "I know," Elias replied, pulling a chair beside him. "I'm sorry for that." His father nodded slowly. "Your mother always said you'd find your way back, though she never told me how." Elias looked out the window. "Maybe she prayed too hard," he said with a small smile. Then after a pause, "Dad, did you ever feel like God was asking too much of you?" The old man's eyes softened. "Every day," he said, "but I learned something from your mother. Obedience doesn't mean understanding. It means trusting that even when you can't see the road, He can." Elias thought about that long after their visit ended. He realized that faith had always been easier when life was predictable, when obedience felt like routine rather than risk. But now, every step seemed to demand surrender, the kind that costs something. A few days later, Father Damien asked if he could help with the parish's outreach to the poor. "We visit the workers' district on Fridays," the priest said. "Soup, prayer, conversation, mostly presents. They need someone who can listen." Elias hesitated. "I don't know if I'd be any good at that." The priest smiled. "Listening is obedience too." So that Friday, Elias found himself carrying baskets of bread and fruit through narrow streets that smelled of dust and rain. Children chased after them, laughing. Inside a dim alley, an old man sat alone beside a broken cart. His hands trembled as he tried to light a small fire. Elias knelt down, offered him a cup of soup, and simply sat beside him. "You don't need to say anything," the man whispered. "It's enough that you're here." Elias didn't realize it then, but something holy was happening. In that small act of sitting beside suffering without trying to fix it, he discovered a quiet kinship with Christ, who also sits beside us in our pain, not always to explain, but to accompany. Over the following weeks, the parish community began to recognize him. The children greeted him by name. The elderly smiled when he passed. He helped clean the church, carried boxes to the shelter, and sometimes joined Father Damien for evening prayers. His hands, once used to typing numbers and signing papers, now carried bread, candles, and rosaries. Yet obedience, he learned, is never without its trials. One evening, while locking up the chapel, he overheard two parish volunteers whispering near the door. "Strange how he suddenly shows up after years away," one said. "People don't change that quickly." "Maybe he's looking for attention," the other replied. "Some kind of redemption story." Their voices cut through him like cold air. For a moment, all the old shame returned. The years of neglect, the pride, the mistakes he'd tried to bury. He almost turned back, ready to leave again, when Father Damien appeared in the doorway. "You heard them," the priest said gently. Elias nodded. "They're not wrong." The old man shook his head. "They're not right either. Remember this, Elias. When you start walking toward God, not everyone will understand. But obedience isn't a performance for people's approval. It's an act of love for the one who sees your heart." That night, Elias stayed in the chapel long after the candles burned low. He knelt before the crucifix and whispered, "Lord, teach me to love you more than the opinions of others. Teach me to obey even when no one sees." In that stillness, something within him deepened, not a burst of revelation, but a slow, steady peace. He began to realize that holiness wasn't about escape from imperfection, but about faithfulness in the middle of it. As autumn gave way to early winter, the parish prepared for its annual food drive. Elias organized the collection, filling the hall with baskets of bread, flour, and canned goods. He worked late into the night, laughing with volunteers, cleaning the floors, stacking boxes. For the first time in years, he felt a joy that had no reason other than giving itself away. When the night ended, Father Damien walked him to the door. "You look tired," he said. "Good tired," Elias replied, "like something inside me is finally at rest." The priest smiled. "That's what obedience feels like. Rest that doesn't come from having less to do, but from knowing why you do it." Later that week, a letter arrived addressed in unfamiliar handwriting. It was from the elderly woman whose groceries he had carried weeks earlier. Inside was a short note. "Thank you for that day. You didn't know it, but I had prayed that morning for a sign that God hadn't forgotten me. Your kindness was that sign. You carried more than my groceries, dear. You carried hope." Elias sat for a long time holding the letter, his eyes stinging with quiet tears. He thought of his mother, of her small acts of obedience that once went unseen. Perhaps heaven had noticed after all. One evening, Father Damien asked him to lead a short prayer during Mass. Elias froze at first, unsure if he was worthy. But when he stepped up to the lectern and looked at the congregation, the faces of the poor, the weary, the faithful, he felt only peace. "Brothers and sisters," he began, his voice trembling. "Christ said that those who do the will of his Father are his family. I used to think that meant the holy or the perfect, but now I know it means the willing, those who love, forgive, and serve even when it's hard. If that's all it takes to be his brother, then I want to belong to that family." When he finished, silence filled the church, not empty, but full, as if heaven itself was listening. After Mass, as he helped extinguish the candles, Father Damien whispered, "You've found your place, Elias." Elias smiled, his eyes fixed on the crucifix. "Maybe it was never lost," he said quietly. "Maybe I just stopped listening." That night, as he walked home beneath the stars, he looked up and thought of his mother's words once more. Do God's will, even when it costs you something. Now he finally understood. The cost was small compared to the reward. Not fame, not ease, but belonging. He no longer felt like a man returning to faith. He felt like a son returning home. And in that home, built not of wood or stone, but of obedience and mercy, his heart began to live again. Winter arrived quietly, folding the little town in white silence. The river slowed beneath a thin layer of ice, and the bell tower wore a crown of frost. Every morning, Elias swept the church steps before dawn, his breath rising in small clouds as he worked. He no longer thought of it as duty. It had become his prayer, each stroke of the broom a whispered thank you, each cleared stone a sign of readiness. Father Damien's health had begun to waver as the cold deepened. His cough lingered, and his steps grew slower. One evening after Mass, Elias walked the priest home through the snow-dusted streets. The old man's hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his scarf. "I've watched you these past months," Father Damien said. "You've learned the most difficult obedience, to remain steady in the small things. Many want to do great deeds for God but ignore the greatness hidden in the ordinary." Elias smiled faintly. "I used to think I had to do something extraordinary to please him. "And now?" the priest asked. "Now I think he's pleased when I show up. When I sweep the steps, feed the hungry, visit my father, and forgive the people who doubt me." Father Damien nodded. "You found peace not by understanding everything, but by standing where grace flows. That's the secret of obedience. It's less about control and more about trust." When they reached the rectory, the old man stopped by the gate. "Elias, the Lord may ask something greater of you soon. Don't fear it when it comes." Those words lingered in Elias's mind long after he left. He wondered what the priest had seen in him, or perhaps what God was preparing. He didn't feel ready for anything great. His peace had come from simplicity. But sometimes obedience leads from small beginnings to larger tests. A few days later, a heavy snowstorm swept through the valley, cutting off power and closing the roads. The church became a shelter for travelers and locals whose homes had lost heat. Elias worked tirelessly, building fires, handing out blankets, and comforting frightened children. He barely slept for 2 days, his body aching but his spirit strangely alive. On the third night, Father Damien collapsed in the rectory. The parish nurse called for Elias, who rushed in to find the priest pale and struggling to breathe. "It's pneumonia," she said quietly. "He's very weak." Elias sat beside him through the night, holding his hand as snow fell beyond the window. The old man opened his eyes and whispered, "Do not be afraid of what comes next. Keep the lamp burning." "Rest now," Elias said softly. "We'll take care of everything." But Father Damien shook his head. "Not just the church, the people. They need shepherds, not just caretakers. And you, Elias, you've been called to more than you realize." Tears welled in Elias's eyes. "I'm not a priest, I'm just a son who obeys," the old man interrupted. "That is enough." By dawn, the storm began to fade. The first rays of sunlight broke through the clouds as the priest's breathing slowed. Elias felt his grip loosen, and a deep stillness filled the room. The bell rang softly in the distance, not for mass, but for a soul returning home. For a long while, Elias sat motionless. He prayed not for miracles, but for strength to accept what had been taken. "Lord," he whispered, "let me keep the fire he lit." The days that followed were heavy with silence. The parish mourned deeply. Father Damien had been more than a priest. He had been their anchor. Elias helped organize the funeral, arranging flowers, preparing hymns, ensuring every candle was lit. Yet beneath the sorrow, a strange peace filled him, as if the old man's spirit now lived within every quiet act of service. During the funeral mass, Elias stood near the altar, holding the crucifix the priest had loved. The church overflowed with people, villagers, beggars, travelers, all those whose lives had been touched by the priest's compassion. As the choir sang in Paradisum, Elias looked up at the stained glass window, where sunlight broke into beams of color that fell over the coffin like a blessing. When the service ended, the bishop approached Elias. "I've heard much about your faith and service," he said. "Father Damien spoke of you often. He believed God had given you a vocation, one that begins with obedience and grows through love." Elias bowed his head. "I only tried to follow his example," the bishop smiled. "Then perhaps that example has already become your mission." In the weeks after the funeral, Elias continued the parish work, visiting the poor, leading morning prayers, repairing the old rectory roof with his own hands. He found that every act of care brought him closer to God. The town began to look to him for guidance, though he never sought attention. They said his calm presence reminded them of Father Damien. One evening, while tidying the sacristy, he found the priest's old journal tucked behind a stack of hymnals. Inside were notes, prayers, and reflections written in small, deliberate handwriting. One passage caught his eye. "The measure of a disciple is not how loudly he speaks of God, but how quietly he obeys him. Grace often hides in simple tasks, sweeping, waiting, forgiving, holding someone's hand." The Son of God did not seek power, but presence. Elias closed the book slowly, tears forming again. He realized that obedience was not the end of faith, but its language, the way love speaks without words. Winter began to melt into spring. The ice cracked, and the sound of water returned to the river. Flowers pushed through thawing soil, stubborn and bright. One morning, the bishop returned to the parish and invited Elias to walk with him by the river. "You've served faithfully," the bishop said. "Have you ever considered a deeper call, perhaps to the priesthood?" Elias hesitated. He had thought about it in secret, but the idea frightened him. "I'm not worthy," he said. "None of us are," the bishop replied gently. "But obedience isn't about worthiness, it's about willingness. The world doesn't need perfect men, only hearts ready to love. That night, Elias knelt once again before the crucifix. The candlelight flickered over Christ's face, illuminating the wounds that spoke of perfect surrender. He whispered, "Lord, if this is your will, then make me brave enough to say yes." He stayed there until dawn, the silence of the church filled with the sound of his heartbeat and the soft whisper of grace. When the first light entered through the stained glass, he knew his answer had already been given. Obedience was not a single yes, but a lifetime of them, one sunrise at a time. From that day forward, Elias walked with a new steadiness, not as a man seeking direction, but as one who had found his purpose in simply saying yes. Spring ripened into summer, and the parish seemed to breathe again. Flowers bloomed in the courtyard, bells rang in fuller tones, and the air carried the scent of incense and earth. Yet within Elias, the rhythm of obedience had deepened into something beyond duty, a quiet covenant between his heart and heaven. Each day began before sunrise as he knelt before the crucifix and whispered, "Not my will, but yours." He had begun formal discernment for the priesthood under the bishop's guidance, though the path still felt uncertain. There were moments when fear returned, the old fear of failure, of not being enough. But each time doubt whispered, he remembered Father Damien's final words, "Keep the lamp burning." That phrase had become his prayer, his compass. One morning, as the sun rose over the river, Elias sat outside the rectory reading from the Gospel of Mark, the same passage that had once awakened him months before. "Whoever does the will of God is my brother and sister and mother." He closed his eyes and let the words sink deep. Family, belonging. It no longer felt abstract. It had become reality. A family made not by blood, but by shared obedience, by love lived out in the ordinary. Later that day, the parish organized a festival to celebrate the feast of St. Hedwig. Children danced in the square, women prepared tables of bread and soup, and music echoed through the narrow streets. Elias moved quietly among them, helping where needed, carrying tables, laughing with the children, blessing food before it was served. There was joy everywhere, yet the kind that came from gratitude rather than luxury. An elderly man approached him, leaning on a cane. "You must be the one who took Father Damien's place," he said. Elias smiled humbly. "No one could take his place. I only try to continue his work." The old man nodded. "He would be proud. You remind me of him. Not because you preach loudly, but because you listen deeply. That's rarer than you think." Those words stayed with him long after the music faded. That evening, as twilight settled over the town, Elias returned to the church. He walked through the nave, touching the pews polished by generations of prayer. The scent of candle wax filled the air, and the light from the stained glass stretched across the altar like a benediction. He stood before the crucifix and whispered, "Lord, when you called me to obedience, I thought you meant surrendering control. But you meant surrendering fear. I see that now." He knelt, feeling the stillness wrap around him like a cloak. "You never asked for perfection, only trust." As he prayed, the door creaked open behind him. It was the bishop, his presence gentle as the evening wind. "Elias," he said softly, "the seminary has accepted your application. You'll begin your studies in the fall." Elias's breath caught. He had longed for this moment, yet it humbled him more than it excited him. "Thank you, Bishop. I only hope I can serve faithfully." The bishop smiled. "Service is never about ability. It's about love. And you've already learned the hardest lesson, to listen." That night, Elias couldn't sleep. He sat by the window of the rectory, watching the moon reflect off the river. His mind drifted through the seasons, the winter of silence, the spring of renewal, the summer of obedience. He thought of his mother's hands clasped in prayer, of Father Damien's steady voice, of the faces of the poor who had taught him what humility looked like. Each memory was a stone in the foundation of the life he was building, not of success, but of surrender. Weeks passed, and as summer drew to a close, he prepared to leave for the seminary. The parish gathered for a farewell mass. The church was filled to its rafters. Farmers, mothers, children, even travelers who had found warmth in its walls. Elias stood at the lectern once more, the same place where months ago his voice had trembled. This time it carried with calm conviction. "My friends," he began, "I came back here lost, believing that faith was about understanding. But I've learned that faith is about belonging, to God, to each other, to a love greater than fear. Obedience is not a chain that binds us. It's a door that opens to freedom. We don't obey because we are afraid of God. We obey because we trust Him, because His will is love, and his love never fails. He paused, scanning the faces before him. The children smiling shyly, the elderly clutching their rosaries, the workers who had found food and hope in this place. Each of you has taught me what it means to be family, not a family of blood, but of faith. You've shown me Christ in the way you care for one another. So when I go, I won't be leaving you. I'll carry this family with me. Every prayer, every act of kindness, every moment of grace. Tears glistened in the eyes of many. The bishop rose to bless him, and the choir sang softly, "Here I am, Lord." As the final notes faded, sunlight poured through the stained glass, bathing the altar in gold. It was as if heaven itself had opened its hands in approval. That evening, Elias walked one last time along the riverbank. The air was warm, heavy with the scent of earth and rain. He stopped near the bridge where the water shimmered in the fading light. For a moment, he thought of all the roads ahead, the studies, the vows, the unknown challenges. Fear stirred faintly, but peace followed close behind. He knelt by the water and whispered, "Lord, you've called me to follow, and I will. But let me never forget where you found me. In the silence, in the small things, in the faces of the poor. Keep my heart low enough to listen, and my hands ready to serve." A breeze rose from the river, carrying with it the scent of spring long past. It felt like an answer, wordless, but certain. He stood, turned toward the church in the distance, and saw the faint glow of a single lamp still burning in the window. The sanctuary light, constant and steady, just as Father Damien had asked him to keep. Elias smiled. "The lamp is still burning," he whispered, "and it will never go out." As he walked home, stars bloomed across the sky. The world was vast and uncertain, but obedience had given him something unshakable, a compass that always pointed toward love. He no longer needed to see the whole path. It was enough to take the next step. When he reached the church doors, he turned once more toward the heavens and whispered the words that had carried him through every season. "Fiat voluntas tua," thy will be done. And in that simple prayer, the story of his life, the story of every soul that learns to obey, found its quiet perfection. He bowed his head, and the bell rang softly in the night, echoing across the valley like a promise kept. "Whoever does the will of God," he murmured, "is my brother and sister and mother." He smiled through tears, knowing that this family, the family of faith, would endure forever. And as he stepped into the light of the chapel, the flame flickered, steady and warm, a sign that grace still lived and would always live wherever hearts said yes. If this story touched your heart, take a moment now to like, share, and subscribe, so that more souls can hear messages of faith, hope, and renewal like this one. And let me know in the comments how God is working in your life today.